Welcome into episode 10 of Jacket Sports Weekly. We're going to start it off talking about men's and women's wrestling with Luke Andrusik. Then I'm going to turn it over to Cade Henderson to give a fall sports recap. Then we'll talk women's basketball with Joseph Cirillo and men's basketball with Benicio DeFalco. You won't want to miss it here on Jacket Sports Weekly.
Welcome to Jacket Sports Weekly, Waynesburg University's weekly sports show where we cover the best of the best in athletics. Our analysts discuss a multitude of highlight plays such as touchdown passes.
And Barber's going to throw again, one-on-one. Does he got it in him? That's a catch! Tyler Richmond with flags thrown everywhere makes the catch! Touchdown, Waynesburg!
And ones.
This was low, Waynesburg's going to get it! Suggs is going to pull away here, go for the layup, and it's going to fall in and one! PJ Suggs!
And home runs.
Higgins drives one to left field. The left fielder running back, and that ball is out of here. Grace Higgins.
Join us every Wednesday to see what's new in Waynesburg University athletics.
Welcome into the first segment of Jacket Sports Weekly. Brett Gambita here. Luke Andrusik joins me to talk about men's and women's wrestling. Luke, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. How are you?
Good. Penn State Altoona. Women's picked up their first win against them. First win in program history for the Waynesburg University women's wrestling team. How big is that for this program?
I mean, I don't know how to say it other than how you said it. It was big. It was huge. It was massive. A huge win. Anytime you start a new program with new players, a new coach at a university, you expect success. And when you get that win in your second season, they didn't get one last season, but they finally picked up their first one at the beginning of this season. It's going to be a huge booster for them for the rest of the season.
Waynesburg's points in this match, they all came from forfeits, but in an extra bout, Anastasia Caridi picked up an extra pin. It was her second career win. How important is that for her individually?
Yeah, she picked up that pin in a minute 26 seconds. Her first win came at the John Carroll Women's Round Robin, where she competed at the 117 weight class and finishing in fourth place. So I think Anastasia, having someone young in this program that can come and build through 4 years is going to be really helpful to Carly Thomas and the rest of this women's wrestling program.
And what are you expecting to see against this team against Pitt Johnstown? They will have already wrestled by the time this comes out, but what are you expecting to see?
Doing some Pitt Johnstown research, going into depth on their women's wrestling team, they don't have anyone at the 180 and 207 weight class like Waynesburg does. So expect 2 forfeits in those classes. The other ones, it's going to be tight. We have Jakaya Matthews, Anastasia Caridi is going to be wrestling tonight, Analia Mejia, and Melanie Matherson. All are good young wrestlers. Expect them to put up some fight against Pitt Johnstown tonight.
Over on the men's side, they also took on Penn State Altoona here recently. It was a 45-0 win, the first win in the career of Bobby Patneski as the head coach of Waynesburg men's wrestling. Do you think he's proving that he belongs here at Waynesburg?
I mean, when you get a win, like I said, kind of like the women's side, when you're just starting a program, you're just starting out with a new coach, it's important to get that first win. When you get that first win in your first attempt against Penn State Altoona, I mean, that's huge. Getting Ryland Parker. Ryland Parker got the W with a pin in 58 seconds at 125, 141, 157, and 165 were all forfeited. Jesse Orban he wrestled outstanding, winning 9-4 in decision. 184, AJ Tomino won in a pin in a minute 49, and in 197 we had 2 forfeits. So that's how Waynesburg ended up beating Penn State Altoona. It's a big win for them, again, to get a boost for the rest of the season.
Now, Coach Patneski actually decided to have this match the night before the W&J Invitational. He said it was kind of just to make sure everyone made their correct weight class and to get the jitters out. So what do you think about that?
Well, it ended up working. I think that's all you can say about it. They wrestled at Penn State, or against Penn State Altoona, get that one, got the jitters out, as you mentioned, Brett, and then they headed to the W&J Invitational. And they wrestled pretty well there. They finished in 16th, not exactly what they wanted as a team, but they had 2 top 3 finishes there.
And you want to get into those top 3 finishes?
Yeah, well, Jesse Orban, the PAC Wrestler of the Week, he went 4-1 in this past week. He won his match versus Penn State Altoona, and he placed second at the W&J Invitational at his weight class. So Austin Fleming, he started off 5-0 against the top guy in his weight class. Ended up losing, falling behind, but he placed third in his weight class. Also, let's see who else. Ryland Parker had a 10-2 decision win, and Braden Barbeo with a pin W at the W&J Invitational as well.
Going back to Penn State Altoona for a second, Jesse Orban scored a 9-4 decision, but He said he needs to be better, so what do you think he can do to improve his skills?
Well, I mean, the only way to make it better other than winning by decision is pinning guys. I mean, I'm not a wrestler. I never wrestled. I can't give you in-depth insight on how he's got to do better, but the only way to do better is by pinning a guy, and I think we've seen enough out of Jesse Orban to know he's good. He's a good wrestler. He's going to win by decision, but if he wants to be better, get a pin, Jesse, and we'll see.
What do you expect to see in the near future from this team?
Well, they have a lot of young guys. Like I mentioned, some guys like Rylan Parker, Braden Barbeo, Caleb McCormick, Jarvis Thomas, Isaiah Siwick. These guys are all guys that have been in the program or are new and are going to be ushered in for this new era of Waynesburg wrestling.
Well, Luke, thanks for joining us here to talk about the wrestling teams. By the time this is out, women's wrestling will have already competed in Pitt Johnstown. They also have a match in Millersville this Sunday. Men's wrestling is back in action this Saturday at Alfred, New York. And that's all we have for men's and women's wrestling. We'll throw it over to Cade Henderson for a fall sports recap.
Welcome back to Jacket Sports Weekly. I'm Cade Henderson, here to bring you your fall sports recap. Volleyball started last week on Wednesday with a loss on the road to St. Vincent in a sweep. Larissa Howe had a strong performance, leading the team in kills and blocks, while senior Riley Roofley led the team in assists. The Yellow Jackets then finished their campaign on last Friday, losing at Franciscan 3-1. They went through a gritty overtime battle to take set 1 26-24 before losing the next 3. Junior Christina Zadrozny led the team with 11 kills, while junior Ray Boniaga had 14 assists and led the team with 11 digs. Waynesburg earned 0 victories in President's Athletic Conference play, continuing a PAC losing streak that dates back to last November. The Yellow Jackets end the year with a collective record of 2-25. Moving over to football, they ended their season strong with a senior day victory over the visiting St. Vincent Bearcats 35-24. The game began with a 3-minute Bearcat drive that was capped off by a 25-yard Matthew Davis rushing touchdown, taking an early 7-0 lead over the Yellow Jackets. After Waynesburg stalled on their first drive, junior Ethan Floyd blocked a punt and scooped the football, scoring the game-tying touchdown, making it 7-7. Impact defensive plays defined the first half for Waynesburg, and this trend continued on St. Vincent's next drive. Freshman Jerron Hale stripped the ball from wideout Chris Downs to give Waynesburg prime field position before junior running back Carson Shriver punched in a 3-yard touchdown to make it 14-7. St. Vincent scored 10 unanswered before the end of the first half, including a Chris Downs receiving touchdown and the go-ahead field goal from Justin Eme. The Yellow Jackets came out firing in the second half with 3 straight touchdowns, 2 from Carson Shriver and the other by tight end Giovanni Cipoletti on his only reception of the day. St. Vincent attempted to mount a late comeback with Chris Downs scoring a second touchdown of the day, but a Jerron Hale interception iced the game, capping off his impressive performance. Shriver ended with over 100 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground, an impressive day for the emerging junior. And sophomore quarterback Luke Hudson had just 3 incompletions, going 18 for 21 with 205 passing yards, a touchdown, and an interception. With the win over St. Vincent, Waynesburg ends the season at 4-6 for a second straight time and their 3rd time in 4 years, with all 4 of their wins this year coming in conference play. Coming up, I'll be finishing the fall sports recap with breaking football news and the upcoming women's soccer playoff match. But first, here is Brett Gambita's interview with Carson Shriver here on Jacket Sports Weekly.
Here with Carson Shriver, 3 rushing touchdowns today. What was the key to get the run game going?
The offensive line, those tight ends, the wide receivers, they all block their butts off. I can't be more proud of them guys, them seniors coming out doing what they do. Love those guys, and it all starts with them up front.
And what was it like to play one last game here with your seniors?
It's crazy, man. It makes me want to be emotional. Like I never had leaders like that in my life. They they got my back when I'm down, stuff like that. Those are my brothers. I love those guys. It's emotional, man.
How does this win make you feel towards next season?
It's a big step. We're changing the culture around here. Coach Coleman's changing the culture. We gotta continue to build off this and continue to get better each and every day in the off season, in the weight room, all that type of stuff.
Congrats. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Jacket Sports Weekly. I'm Cade Henderson, here to finish off the fall sports recap, starting off with a recent development inside the football team. On Tuesday, head coach Cornelius Coleman was relieved of his duties after 4 seasons with the Yellow Jackets. Originally hired in December of 2021, Coleman went 14-24 over the course of his tenure, never once eclipsing the 500 mark, going 4-6 in 3 of the seasons and 2-8 in 2023. Alongside Coleman, defensive coordinator Dave Arnold and special teams coordinator Dominic Bornman were also let go. Finishing up with women's soccer, the Yellow Jackets traveled to Don Lyle Field this past weekend to play for a President's Athletic Conference championship against the #1 seeded Grove City Wolverines. Just the week prior, the Yellow Jackets were down by Grove City 4-0 on a stormy night at John F. Wiley Stadium. Unfortunately, a similar result befell the Yellow Jackets on Saturday. The Wolverines got started early with a 14th-minute goal from Lauren Muhana, which was all Grove City needed in what was a hard-fought 1-0 victory at home for the Wolverines. For their efforts, freshman forward Miracle Hershey and junior goalkeeper Lex Greenleaf earned all PAC tournament team honors. Despite the loss, Waynesburg's season is not yet done, as they have earned a playoff spot in the ECAC, matching up for a second time this season with Pitt Greensburg. Back in September, the Yellow Jackets traveled to Greensburg, where they collected their first loss of the season 1-0 to the Bobcats, the only goal being scored by Maya Wertelet in the 73rd minute. This time around, Waynesburg is looking for revenge, earning home field advantage against Pitt Greensburg at 6 p.m. this Saturday. That's it here for the Fall Sports Recap. I'm Cade Henderson. Coming up next on Jacket Sports Weekly, we have Joe Cirillo here to talk some women's basketball. Don't go anywhere. You're watching Jacket Sports Weekly.
Thank you, Cade Henderson, for that fall sports recap. Brett Gambita back up here on the desk. Now I've got Joe Cirillo to my left, your guys right, and we're going to talk women's basketball. The season starts Friday at the Coaches vs. Cancer Classic. They will play William Patterson University first. Joe, what can we expect to see in this tournament?
In this tournament, going into it, it's the first games that we're going to see from this women's basketball team. And so I'm looking for a lot of kind of just trying to see what's going to work the best this season. The big thing that you're going to see is that Jules Moorbacher is going to be out on these first 2 games. Still competing with the women's soccer team as they have the ECAC tournament this weekend. So if they win in that tournament, we could also not see Jules Moorbacher in the next 2 after that. So the first 4 games, she could potentially not be in, but that is okay. They still have those of Tori Wazalowski, Clara Page Miller, that could still replace that void that Moorbacher would be in, and maybe be in more of a situation that they can play a little bit more with speed. With Moorbacher, it's just a little bit slower, not a whole lot, but they can play with a little bit more speed with Clara Page Miller and Tori Wazalowski in that as well. But for this William Patterson team, it's a tough team to beat. They went 21-9 over their season last season, and they went all the way through the ECAC tournament and faced off against Allegheny in the championship, which they lost. But it still just shows you how competitive they are as a 21-9 team. For this one, I think it's really just going to come down to who's going to come out on top. For me, I'm taking the Ladies Jays exiting this tournament with a 1-1 record. With this William Patterson game, they're going to play them. And then after that, they would either play York College or Salisbury University from there.
So this segment's going to be a little bit different than the men's basketball segment coming up with Benicio DeFalco, mainly because this women's team is 0-0. The men's basketball team, they're 3-0. But I want to fast forward here to some PAC play. I know we won't see a PAC game until about December, but Waynesburg women's basketball was projected to finish 5th out of 6 teams in the South Division, according to the PAC preseason polls. So What can you make of that? I mean, this is a team that almost made the playoffs last year. They missed it by 1 game. Do you think this rating is a little bit harsh?
I mean, I think with preseason polls, we've seen it throughout all sports, not just the winter sports, not just the fall or the spring. We've seen it throughout all of them, that they can be wrong, and they most likely will be. In this case, within that South Division, you have teams like Bethany and Washington and Jefferson that are still going to be formidable opponents, but Washington and Jefferson has lost some very key starters on their squad. And for Waynesburg, they only really lost Madison Dayton, which has been in a substitution place for majority of last season anyway, with their bigs that they have down in the paint with Wezolowski, Miller, Moorbacher, and Dayton. You're just kind of taking that one substitute out of the equation. And in this case, I think that it is a little bit harsh, but I do think that they're really going to be able to come into this fast, come into it with a level head, and be able to compete very well in the beginning. Then their first 2 PAC matches that they're going to have is against St. Vincent and against Franciscan, both teams that are going to give you some competition, but I think Waynesburg can pull it out and get on top right before that winter break matchups.
Head coach Jones, he put a big emphasis this season on defense. So what do you think about that?
I think the big thing is that they're still relying on their three-point shooting. And I had an interview with Coach Jones yesterday on him talking about that they're not going to stray away from that, and that it's still going to be a point of emphasis for them, and that they're willing and they're training to be on top of their three-point shooting. And, of course, they've been on top of their free throw shooting as well. And so for this case, you're really just looking to be defensive, slow the ball down a little bit more, and create more pressure on the opposing offense to make mistakes, and you can, take away those mistakes and put them as points on your own for your scoreboard. I think that this team is going to be really able to do that this season. They've really come into their own. They've been able to not, lose a whole lot of momentum with their seniors graduating. Like I said, Madison Dayton's the only significant one on their starting lineups that has been lost from the lineup. And now you're just really coming into their own on what they have and what they've been able to build for the seasons thus far.
Now, who are some of your players to watch out for this season? You talked about some of the forwards and bigs, but maybe get into some more.
In this case, you really got to look to Mia Hankins and Macy Justice, those three-point shooters that you're going to have beyond the arc. They're going to want to dish it out to them as best they can with, like I said, with Miller, Moorbacher, Wezolowski. They're going to want to get the ball around, pass it around, and find that open lane. I was just watching some film from their past games against Westminster and Teal. That's how they operate, and that's how they continue to operate all through last season. I think that's how they're going to continue to operate in this season. I've said it before on the show. I've said it all last season. I've said it probably before that. I think this team has 2 starting lineups in it, and that they just continue to be able to put in fresh legs, be able to make more points, be able to make different adjustments. And I think it's really going to be stressed on Coach Jones as to how he's going to be able to take those keys, take those puzzle pieces, and how he's going to put them together, if it's going to make one beautiful masterpiece or if it's going to be something that's going to be hard to read.
Women's basketball had their first winning season last year since the 2017-18 season. Do you think they'll have another one this season?
I would agree. I think that they definitely are going to be able to make another winning season and a winning statement. This season is playoffs. That's your number one consideration going into this season. Although, yes, you want to look game by game. You want to look conference by conference matchup. You're not looking towards the end. But I think this team knows in their heads, in the back of their minds, we can play well. We can get to that level. We can do this. I think they will through and through.
Thank you, Joe, for joining us to talk about some women's basketball here on Jacket Sports Weekly. The season begins this Friday, and their first game at home is the Friday after. We'll now throw it to Benicio DeFalco to talk about some men's basketball. Men's basketball is 3-0 for the first time since the 1986-1987 season. And to talk about it with us here on Jacket Sports Weekly, we have Benicio DeFalco. Thanks for joining us today, Benicio.
Of course, it feels good to be back. We even covered this team since the spring semester. So, like you said, 3-0 start. The vibes are high.
Feels good to be back, and we had Jackson Rhodes make his Waynesburg Yellow Jacket debut, scoring 23 points against Hilbert College in the Hawks Against Hunger tournament. Was this the debut you were expecting from Jackson Rhodes?
So I wasn't expecting it, being that it was debut. 23 points is no joke, especially at the collegiate level. But I vividly remember this guy working on rehab throughout last season, and he stayed with the team the whole time. I remember him traveling, constantly seeing him on the sidelines. That's how you earn your respect of your teammates, and that chemistry was already built last season. You know, even though he was hurt, nowhere in there was he away from the team. And like I said, 23 points is no joke, shooting 52% from the field. You can live with that. He kind of plays that small forward position, similar to what we saw from Anton Baker just a season ago. And the guy brings a big spark to this Waynesburg starting lineup.
And then to close out the Hawks Against Hunger tournament, Waynesburg defeated St. John Fisher 75-73 in overtime, a big comeback win. They trailed. They didn't even lead in the first half. What were the keys to bring Waynesburg back in this one?
So for starters, if you look at last season, this team wasn't a good team from coming from behind. This team, they never gave up. Casey Kazee had multiple steals down the stretch and defensive rebounds despite being undersized. That effort went a long way. Waynesburg went on a 12-0 run. We saw some key buckets from Scott Bilvis and Jackson Rhodes. Scott ended up with 22 points, 5 for 9 from three-point range. That was a great effort. And then Rhodes, both those guys were both named to the all-tournament team because of this effort. And it was just a phenomenal comeback and a great game to watch altogether. Like I said, you got the undersized guys making plays. Those things matter, and they kind of build a reputation for your team.
Scott Bilvis has had back-to-back 20-point games now, most recently the 72-68 win yesterday over Penn State New Kensington to make the Yellow Jackets 3-0. What would you say makes this team different from years past?
So I'll say this, the chemistry looks a lot more improved. There's not as much individual ball. Not that that was a problem last season, but the depth is there. Like you look at last year, once the stars went out and they started to get to that bench, there wasn't a lot there. Aiden Blake stepped up, Grant Barnhart, Demetrius Rivers. All these guys do things that don't even sometimes end up in the stat sheet. But another thing, this team is shooting a lot more threes than we've ever seen. And one thing I will say that is similar, it's Tim Fusina's bread and butter, defense and rebounding. That's the only thing that I can see that's similar with this team outside of Jalen Goins, Scott Bilvis, and Casey Kazee, maybe Aiden Blake. None of these guys played last season, so they're all playing with a fresh start, and they look angry. They look like they're out here to prove something.
Not only is Waynesburg 3-0, but they've also scored 70 or more points in all three games. Something they haven't done since the turn of the decade is average 70 points for an entire season. Would you say that the three-point shooting has been that main change in this scoring?
Oh, for certain. They're going down the floor, and sometimes, I remember last night, for instance, Aiden Blake, he went down the floor on a fast break, and he shot a three-pointer, and no one in the gym looked frustrated. Like, it looked like it was routine. And when the team is playing with that confidence where they're willing to just chuck up threes, and if they could shoot at an effective percentage, I think this team could be a team to look out for, kind of similar to BYU, defense and 3 points.
I wanted to ask you specifically about Grant Barnhart and Aiden Blake. They both transferred in last season. We didn't really see a lot from them, though, last season, so what has allowed them this year to kind of find that level of success?
So for Barnhart, he only played in 17 games last season, so he's been completely healthy. Last night he ended up with 9 points, all of which coming from three-point range. This team they're willing to allow him to shoot threes because they know if he can get hot, he's a legit scorer in the President's Athletic Conference. Aiden Blake, he brought a great spark off the bench last night, and defensively and then also offensively. He hit a three to start. He was, I think, 2 for 3, his first 3 shots of the game from three-point range. And ever since then, they just gave him the green light, and they showed the confidence even in the bench, which that's a big step up going from last season. And another thing I want to speak on is Jalen Goins was out last night. I'm being told the injury isn't anything to be concerned with. But if he's out for a long period of time, those two players, I think we can see a potential start as the year goes on.
I wanted to touch on another guy that we've yet to mention so far, and that's Mikey Smith, second on the team in points in the opener. This has been his first real opportunity to prove himself, so what can you say about him as a player?
Well, Mikey Smith, he plays phenomenal defense. We saw a big-time block last night. Plays great in transition. That's another thing I wanted to speak on with this Waynesburg team. Every time they get a defensive rebound, they're already looking up court. He's an undersized big, but you wouldn't be able to tell that with his play on the court. He's extremely strong, and he used that strength in order to box out taller defenders. And he's been a great guy for this Waynesburg team. Like I said, he's serving as their center position. He's only just about 6'2", so he's undersized. He plays with grit. This whole team does, and they kind of just bounce off each other's energy.
Any predictions for the Omni Inc. tip-off tournament this weekend?
Well, I was a little bit concerned because in non-conference play, all these games have been tight, but I think it's also built this team and brought them together. So I just want to see how they're going to do versus Case Western Reserve. I don't think that's going to be an easy test whatsoever. So just kind of seeing what we've seen to this point, I think we're going to see a good performance from Scott. He scored 20 points in 2 of the 3 games to this point. Depending if Jalen Goins is healthy, we're going to see much more play from Aiden Blake and Grant Barnhart. So just seeing those other guys step up. Demetrius Rivers as well. I know he doesn't have a bunch that ends up in the stat sheet. Same thing with Casey Kazee, but these guys are diving on the floor. They're making the defensive stops that matter most in crunch time.
Well, Benicio, thank you for joining us here up on the desk to talk about men's basketball. And that'll do it for this episode of Jacket Sports Weekly. Men's basketball hosts the Omni Tip-Off Tournament this Friday and Saturday. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode of Jacket Sports Weekly.
This has been a production of Waynesburg Community Television.